We've never been more connected, yet so alone. In today's digital age, we have the entire world at our fingertips. And as a result, we end up forming connections with people we've never met in real life. But what happens when our engagement with these public figures goes beyond mere entertainment and creates an unhealthy, one sided, exploitative dynamic? This is what's known as a parasocial interaction. Parasocial interactions are a phenomenon that has become increasingly prevalent in the digital age. The ability to access an abundance of information and media has led to the formation of connections with complete strangers online. A parasocial relationship is a one-sided emotional connection that individuals have with public figures such as celebrities, influencers, and even fictional characters. It is a term used to describe a feeling of closeness and familiarity that people have with someone that doesn't know they exist. This type of relationship is made possible through the constant access to information and content that we have today through social media and other online contemporary platforms. While it may seem harmless, there can exist potential negative effects of parasocial relationships. For example, it can lead to feelings of disappointment or even betrayal when a celebrity or influencer behaves in a way that doesn't align with their expectations. Additionally, it can also lead to unrealistic expectations and dissatisfaction with our own lives. This is because we tend to compare our own lives to the curated, highlight reel versions of the lives of celebrities and influencers that we see on social media. The term parasocial interaction was coined to describe one-sided interactions in the 50s with radio and TV personalities. Parasocial interactions are an apparently unreciprocated relationship between a viewer and a performer. One quote from Horton and Wall's article refers to it as a simulacrum of a conversational give and take, meaning a representation of the interpersonal communication that exists in the real. Almost 7 decades have passed since the creation of the concept, and with the emergence of social media and other modern contemporary platforms such as YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok, alongside legacy media platforms such as radio, television, and the silver screen, the phenomenon of parasocial interactions has become much more commonplace and more sophisticated and nuanced. The COVID-19 pandemic led to a socially distanced society, working from home, and losing the ability to see friends and loved ones. Entire workspaces and classrooms were moved onto the internet, causing people to consume media in larger volumes as a coping strategy to the social isolation. In The Social Distance Between Us, rapper and writer Darren McGarvey refers to social media as something that is sold to us as a means of connecting and communicating, but incentivizes us to think and behave in ways that leave us feeling isolated and misunderstood. Instagram has been a platform that in recent years has come under repeated fire for the negative effect it has on teenagers, as discovered from its own internal research. Social comparisons with others leads to an increased feeling in loneliness, self-harm, and body issues. Our presence on social media platforms might present as one thing, but our personas on other internet-based platforms such as Discord servers, Twitch chats, or internet forums might reflect a different version of us. We all seem to wear different masks on different platforms depending on who our audience is. The online disinhibition effect is a term conceptualized by psychologist John Schuler. He describes several reasons why people might act differently online than they do in the real world, either in a positive manner or in a more toxic manner. He describes these two states of disinhibition as benign disinhibition and toxic disinhibition. Within some online spaces, people's usernames and avatars aren't indicative of a real-world person, which allows them to use this mask of anonymity to act out and spout toxic behaviour. Spend 5 minutes on the image board website 4chan, where everyone is anonymous, and see how quickly morality goes out the window, where people are free to say and do what they like without fear of consequences. He calls this disassociative anonymity and notes that the online becomes a compartmentalised self, akin to a mask. There are also those online that are more than willing to overshare with strangers, more so than they might usually do in real life, detailing parts of their personal life, locations, states of mental well-being, and so on. Pseudo-anonymous profiles can become identifiable with simple data combing to find key signifiers that would allow for narrowing down the individual's identity. In the case of Twitch users or other influencers who want to maintain their privacy, this might be tough if they accidentally give some data away, or if someone within their chat window gives their personal information out. However, when it comes to parasocial relationships and the performer is always switched on as a representation of themselves. When the camera is turned on, the curtain rises metaphorically and the show begins on their curated stage setting. A well-lit environment, sometimes with multi-angled cameras, high-quality audio production, and props to signpost their authenticity. Batchy is a former Scottish YouTube content creator with over 100,000 subscribers on his channel Batchy HD. He no longer produces content, but was keen to offer some insight into his experiences as a performer online and his experiences with parasocial interactions from his fans.
So we try and maintain kind of boundaries with people who might have that parasocial relationship. I like to try and keep myself at a distance, just in general, from anybody that I met. So this is obviously, I'm talking past tense. Whenever you would do like a meet and greet, or whenever you would meet somebody, you would always try and maintain a small a possible window of time to speak to them. And obviously, because you're meeting more than one person anyway, you do have to try and maintain a level of speed. But at the same time, keeping a shorter interaction with somebody allows them less time to form a connection or to form a bond. If you meet somebody in passing for 2 minutes, you say hi, whatever, nice to meet you, you're less likely to feel attached to them than if you were to spend 45 minutes. Like, if you meet somebody in a nightclub and you have a pint with them and you're having a conversation with them for half an hour, 45 minutes, you might then feel like it would be an appropriate time to exchange numbers and meet up again or whatever. That's why I think it's important, well, that's why I did it anyway, was to try and maintain those shorter connections with people so that you're less inclined to feel that way, just as a method to try and manage it anyway.
In her book Alone Together, writer and MIT professor Sherry Turkle explores the themes of loneliness and isolation within the digital age. She describes a concept which she coins the modern Goldilocks. Not too little, not too much, just right. Texting offers the right amount of access, just the right amount of control. This is the norm now, according to Turkle. A society that keeps in touch with each other, but at arm's length to not get too close to each other. This leads to increasing loneliness and isolation within individuals who feel they have no one to turn to, so they look for connections with individuals online. People are living entire lives on the internet, albeit in a simulated manner. This can be done through platforms such as VR chat, engaging in online relationships in virtual environments. It's almost like choosing to live in the Matrix instead of accepting the reality that exists before you, forfeiting the opportunity to develop themselves and create real-world relationships with people around them. They opt for the parasocial relationships with strangers online. The convergence of our technology means that you simply log off the computer and switch to the smaller device in your hand or your laptop when on the move, with everything you need at your disposal. In the age of connectivity that we live in, we're expected to be always available to reply to a message from a friend or an email from work. The only time we're offline now is when we're asleep, and even then, we're connected to our phones until the very last second. Over time, we've developed an unhealthy psychological dependence on our phones and we tend to feel lost when we don't have it to hand. Social media can be a breeding ground for inadequacy and insecurity, as people often compare their own lives to the lives of others on their screens, whether they are friends, celebrities, or influencers. It's important to recognise, however, that what we see on social media is not an accurate representation of real life. Instead, it's often a carefully curated highlight reel that only showcases the highs and rarely the lows. This can create conflict about what is perceived to be real or not, with filters masking the real person underneath, creating a fictionalized version of reality. This is what philosopher Jean Baudrillard would refer to as hyperreality, which is an inability to distinguish the virtual from the real, as the line between them has become so indistinguishable. Media personas and media feel more real to us than the reality that we inhabit.
You watch this person day after day after day, you see them, you get to know them because they're authentic. Empathically, you see this person's ups and downs, and you're there all the time, watching. And because we have empathic brains, when someone else smiles, you smile. When someone else cries, you cry. And so you feel a connection to them. But the connection is never reciprocated. It can never be reciprocated. So while you feel connected to them, they're not connected to you. And in the absence of actual sensory feedback, what does your mind do? Your imagination takes over.
I don't think that, actually, do you know what? I don't think this is actually targeted towards people with them, but I think this is targeted towards people in general. I think people in general need to stop for a second and think about truly whether or not they are in a parasocial relationship with somebody and they don't realise it, because it's easy done. I've caught myself being in a similar situations before. Like through YouTube, I've worked with other influencers and other creators. I've done stage shows and all sorts of stuff, like with Syndicate, Tom Cassell. And I know about his life through his social media because I followed him online. And whilst I'm not saying that I kind of was a fan of his work, I was just aware of him. There came a strange point where I realised I know quite a lot about you because of the stuff you put online, and you don't know anything about me. And it was one of those weird moments where it was like, are the conversations that I'm having with you motivated based on these factors? But when it comes to like my advice, I'd say that people need to kind of be careful of what they actually say or do or think about people or how they act towards people, especially if they don't know them. And this is one of the key factors, is that it's easy to take an opinion and build an opinion on somebody you've never met. And like I say, parasocial relationships, I think, can also be negative relationships too.
By providing the viewers with entertainment in the form of continuous regular content, our familiarity with these people grows to the point that we begin to think we know and understand them. We begin to want to see them succeed because we think they are our friends. Their performative nature on the platforms they use allows us the ability to donate and financially fund their lifestyle.
It kind of looks like cheese. It kind of smells like cheese. It kind of tastes like cheese, but it isn't cheese. And so but the thing about imitation cheese is that it stays good for years. It's cheap. It's easy. It's accessible. And so a lot of times we'll start using imitation cheese instead of cheese because it's close enough and it's easier. And it checks enough of the boxes. And sometimes people even like imitation cheese more than the real thing.
YouTuber and psychiatrist Alok Kanagia publishes videos and streams on his channel Healthy Gamer GG on common issues surrounding mental well-being and issues that the internet generations may encounter in their lives, touching on topics such as anxiety, video game addiction, pornography addiction, relationships, motivation and depression, as well as several on the phenomenon that is parasocial interactions. Dr. K uses this analogy to liken the concept of parasocial relationships to plastic cheese, and that our mind becomes used to the fake and begins to prefer it to the real. Despite only being an analogy for describing parasocial interactions, it bears resemblance to Baudrillard's concept of simulacra and simulations. The concept of a simulacrum puts forward the notion that in a postmodern world, reality has been replaced by simulations and copies that have no reference to an original. Simulations and copies have become the dominant reality, and that what we perceive is a simulation of reality. Parasocial interactions can be seen as an example of this phenomenon, as they involve forming emotional connections with people we have never met or are unlikely to meet in person. These people, such as celebrities or social media influencers, have become simulacra or copies of real people. We form emotional connections with them based on the information and content that they provide through media, rather than through face-to-face interactions. The emotional connections we form with these public figures are not based on direct personal interactions, but rather on mediated representations of themselves that have been carefully curated and controlled. As Baudrillard suggests, simulations or copies can often become indistinguishable from reality to the point where the distinction between the two becomes blurred.
You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real?
How do we know what is real?
From the early days of pop culture obsessions such as Beatlemania to modern standom, entire subcultures of stans now exist within internet culture as fandoms of notable celebrities and internet personas. The term stan originates from the 2000s track Stan by rapper Eminem, in which fan Stanley obsesses over his idol, writing to him repeatedly to breach that parasocial barrier. As his unhealthy obsession grows, his delusions of Eminem's graphic, lyrical content leads him to begin acting out the things Eminem raps about, depicting self-harm and domestic abuse by creating an imagined relationship with Eminem due to similarities in their upbringings. His paranoia from the lack of reciprocation leads to Stan sending a final message professing his love to Eminem while driving drunk with his girlfriend tied up in the trunk before crashing off a bridge. Eminem eventually responds to his messages, warning him to get some help before he hurts himself. The song ends with Eminem realising that the story he heard recently regarding a car accident was in fact Stan. In the video, Eminem appears to be on the road touring, so his busy lifestyle prevented him from reaching out to Stan. While it's only a fictional song telling the story of an obsessed fan, the adoption of the term Stan within internet culture doesn't paint a positive depiction of fandoms. Additionally, the death of a celebrity or idol can have a significant impact on their fans who have developed parasocial relationships with them. This is because these relationships are often one-sided emotional connections where the fan feels a sense of closeness and familiarity with the celebrity or idol, even though they have never met them in person. When a celebrity or idol dies, it can feel like the loss of a close friend or family member to the fan. The fan may feel like they have lost a source of emotional support, validation, and inspiration that they have come to rely on. It's important for people to recognise the limitations of these relationships and to seek out real-world connections and support when needed. I can't imagine that Horton and Wall would have envisioned how the 21st century would turn out with our convergent devices giving us access to everything. But like Baudrillard, they've managed to analyse mass media and communication in a way that almost feels prophetic on reflection. Parasocial interactions aren't going to go away anytime soon, nor does it seem like there's a way to effectively regulate them. But it's essential to create a better understanding of the phenomenon so that we foster better relationships in future generations, as well as attempt to create a healthier balance between the real world we inhabit and the imagined world we present ourselves in.